Hello everyone, this is Jimmy and welcome back to Omnifactory episode 6. So between episodes I did a few things. First of all, if you see here, I moved our deep mob learning over to here where it's closer to the pulsating polymer clay automation we set up last episode. It's been running for about half a day, maybe a full day. And if you look, we have 21,000 overworld matter, 6,000 extraterrestrial matter, a bunch of pristine essences. So soon we'll have to start processing these pristine essences down automatically. But we'll tackle that problem in a later episode. I also set up some basic crafting for Applied Energistics stuff. So I made a few controllers, some circuits, so on and so forth. And I also built a few MV machines. So let's see what we have here. An extruder, this makes rings for motors and bolts. An autoclave, we'll see what we use that for later. And a upgraded assembly machine for making higher tier circuits and the Applied Energistics cables and conduits. I also set up a couple more blast furnaces. So if you look here, you can actually, blast furnaces can share sides. So these two blast furnaces are sharing the wall in between them. As long as they only share heat-proof casings and coil blocks, they're perfectly happy sharing sides. So we can, use a few less resources that way. And we're cooking up some stainless steel in these. We'll use the stainless steel pretty soon. And wait, what's that? How'd that get there? I'm just tugging your leg. This isn't actually an ME controller. These are the chisel blocks that look like an ME controller. But I put this here because this is the shape of the controller I want to do. It's, practically speaking, it's far larger than what we need. Probably just like the bottom 3 rows of this will be more than enough for the entire series. But I kind of like the look of a big controller. So what we'll do is as we, actually use them, we'll replace the fake controller blocks with real controller blocks. And yeah, so having seen this, I think our goal, at least our first goal today, is to set up a very basic Applied Energistics network. I would like to be able to do digital item storage and maybe, item input output with stuff like storage buses and export buses. So to that end, I've made some ME controllers. Now, again, I've re-enabled channels. So for those of you that are playing along without channels, you won't have these. You get this functionality from your energy acceptor. And I know somebody's going to say, well, Jimmy, energy acceptors are more expensive than controllers, so you're cheating by using these. So let's just delete 8 energy acceptors, and we'll use the 8 controllers instead. I was a little too lazy to actually add a proper crafting recipe, but we'll just use the default one and delete energy acceptors so that we're not, cheating, quote unquote. All right, so let's start by taking these and putting them down here, and then I'll be back once we have a very basic system set up. All right, here we have it. One basic-ish AE system using channels. So I replaced half of the bottom row with, or the bottom layer with real controllers. And the way I set this up is that I have one piece of dense cable coming off of, if I can get unstuck, coming off of each of the faces. Each face of a controller, right, can support up to 32 channels. And this dense cable isn't actually required. You can put the P2P tunnel right up against it. But this way I can see how many channels are in use on each one. So from there, it goes into a P2P tunnel, which goes into this P2P subnet, I guess you could call it. And what I do is I use this subnet to transfer effectively compacted channels all throughout my base. And where I want to use the channels, I put another P2P tunnel. I link the two. So this one you see is C07E is linked to C07E. And it's as if this cable here were connected directly to that cable there. And then on this side of the network, then I have 2 storage drives, or 2 drives filled with 4K storage cells, and my terminals. There's a spot left for the pattern terminal when I get one. So let's dump everything in there. For now, I think we have enough storage to hold everything. So I think we'll just literally start dumping everything in the base into here and see how that goes. All right, we'll come back when we either finish that process or run out of space, whichever comes first. All right, I went ahead and moved everything into our ME system. If you look, there's some items that we have a ridiculous number of. Those aren't actually being stored in our drives. Those are actually being stored in the various drawer systems we have scattered throughout the base. So there's 34,000 ender pearls in here, and it's just connected via a storage bus so that we can see them as if they were in a drive. So now we have all our stuff together. We can, craft without having to run from chest A to chest B to chest C to get materials. But we still don't quite have auto crafting. And the biggest limitation that's holding us back from auto crafting is something called polyethylene. So this polyethylene is a fluid, and it comes from a chemical reactor with ethylene and oxygen or air. And ethylene comes from a distillery, or it comes from ethanol and sulfuric acid in a chemical reactor. Sulfuric acid is just sulfur and water. It's one of these. There we go, water and sulfur dust, so that's easy. But the other product, ethanol, I believe comes from distilling down one of the plant materials. So fermented biomass or just regular biomass, 700 or 1,000 millibuckets of that produces 700 millibuckets of this, and this comes from a brewing machine with water and some planty material. So that's a kind of long chain of stuff. And the reason I wanted to set up Applied Energistics now was so that we could use its fluid capabilities to help us set up that network. So how about I'll make us a few fluid storage buses and fluid export buses, as well as some various machines we need to make ethanol. And we'll come back once we are ready to make us some polyethylene. So before we get too far into ethylene production, we're going to need to use a fair amount of oxygen and hydrogen, both for this process and for various other processes. So I just went ahead and set up a group of electrolyzers. There's only 4 for now, but we can scale it up to 16 pretty easily. It's on as 16x LVCEF. And all I'm doing is taking water and electrolyzing it into its components, which, as we know, are hydrogen and oxygen. And any excess will just void, but these basic quantum tanks hold a lot. They hold what? 64 million millibuckets? So that's 64,000 buckets. And then we'll put a fluid storage bus on each of these so that we can view these fluids anywhere on the AE network and export them. Alright, I think we have all the machines we need to at least begin the production of good old polyethylene. So normally I would do this off camera and just show you the final result, but I've noticed a lot of people tend to get stuck or hung up or at least intimidated by the polyethylene making process. So how about I do this one entirely, well, maybe not entirely live, but at least I'll do as much as I can live so that we can see what exactly goes into making polyethylene. So step 1 is to take sugar canes in a brewery and turn them into biomass. The brewery is a pretty slow machine, so I'm thinking let's do 3 of them. If we set them out like this, I'm choosing to run the entire line on medium voltage. I believe most of the processes can be run on low voltage. I'm just choosing to do it on MV. And if we do that, and if we take a drawer, let's see, do I have a building block? Put it there. We can fill the drawer with sugar canes with an export bus. So this drawer will gradually fill with sugarcane. If we need to, we can speed that up. And then we can distribute the items from that drawer to the brewery. So that'll distribute sugarcane between our breweries. I believe these also need water to run, so let's grab ourselves an endervore. Fill that up. And these will slowly turn our sugar canes into biomass. So I grabbed a tank just to have a biomass buffer. Now, one thing when using fluid conduits again is because you see when you first place them down, they're insert and extract on green, which is really annoying because if you have anything extracting on green, it immediately inserts it into your new conduit. So as a matter of policy, I just always avoid using the green channel on fluid conduits. And what I'm doing with this gadget, the conduit probe, is copy pasting the settings, so I don't need to change them by hand. All right, so now we have biomass. With biomass, I believe the plan is that we can distill that into ethanol, if I'm remembering correctly. Biomass in a distillery with programmed circuit 0 makes ethanol, perfect. So we have a distillery here. So those are breweries, this is a distillery. All right, so that, wait a second. Yeah, that filled this up with biomass. We need to give it a program circuit on 0. Now if I put this in, oh no, it does work, okay. So a program circuit on 0 will slowly turn biomass into ethanol. And once again, let's put that into a buffer tank. This ethanol, I think we might use in a few other places, so I'm actually also going to put a fluid storage bus on it. This way we can view this fluid from our AE system. And I tend to run a line of ME conduits right above my main energy line, and if I have to, I can also run other conduits right alongside it. That's the beauty of these ME conduits, is that they can share block space with all the other conduits. So the next step, now that we have ethanol, is to we can use it to make biodiesel, but that's not what we're going to do for now. We're going to react it with sulfuric acid to make ethylene and dilute sulfuric acid. So let's make sulfuric acid on this side. Sulfuric acid then is made in a chemical reactor as well. And it also takes water, so let's get more of these. And it reacts water with sulfur dust to produce sulfuric acid. So we have an export bus sending sulfur into here. Once we hook that up. And it's a little slow, but that's fine. So once again, let's buffer this because we'll be using sulfuric acid all over the place. So likewise, when we have a buffer, we can just put a storage bus on it. Connect that. It loops here, but whatever, it's fine. So now we have sulfuric acid in the AE system as well. So we have our ethanol and our sulfuric acid. If we come over to our fluid terminal all the way over here, we can see we have ethanol, sulfuric acid, as well as the hydrogen and oxygen we've been slowly producing. Looks like our power is not quite keeping up, so we'll have to upgrade this a little bit. But let's do that after we finish with our ethanol, or with our polyethylene, sorry. So the next step is to take both this ethanol and sulfuric acid and combine them together in a chemical reactor. Perhaps, let's see where we can place this to make it easy to access. Let's put it over here. And then we don't want these connecting. All right, so we can extract sulfuric acid from here and extract ethanol from here and put it into this chemical reactor. And it'll run to combine these into, I think there's two products here. Yeah, ethylene and dilute sulfuric acid. So of the two, ethylene is the one we're after, and we can recycle the dilute sulfuric acid to reuse because we don't want to waste too much sulfur. So let's come over to here and let's start by recycling the dilute sulfuric acid because I think that's the perhaps the easier step. So we will want to extract from here. And I'm going to need a few fluid filters for this one. All right, so we want to insert dilute sulfuric acid into the distillery. And ethylene we want to use, let's get another tank as well then. So we should be extracting ethylene into this tank and dilute sulfuric acid into here. What does it take to turn this back into sulfuric acid? A program circuit on 0. And I found that sometimes program circuits on 0 don't work if you don't open them once first. I don't know, I just open it once first just to be safe. So this will turn it back into regular sulfuric acid. And what we can do then is we should have this set to high priority. And we'll have another tank. You know, tanks are one of those things you can never have too many of. We'll have view auto output. And I know we have a tank for sulfuric acid right there, but since I don't want the system to jam up, I'm actually going to put a separate fluid storage bus here and set it to, oh, that's a P2P tunnel. put a fluid storage bus here and set it to a lower priority. When extracting fluids from the network, you extract from the lowest priority first. I suppose to that end, I can change this. Let's actually change this. So instead of inserting the fluids, I'm actually going, or with a conduit, I'm actually going to insert it with a fluid export bus. That way we can choose to use this sulfuric acid before we use that sulfuric acid. That way the system won't jam up. So we have to actually export two fluids, right? Sulfuric acid and ethanol. And we're hurting a little on energy. Let me borrow a capacitor for now to fix that. So to do two fluids, we need a capacity card, I believe it's what it's called. And we need a bucket of each of those fluids, which shouldn't be too hard to grab. So we can put this in here and tell it to export ethanol and sulfuric acid. This should no longer be hurting on energy. Yeah, there we go. So you can see the ethanol it should be going up. It's going up slowly as it's getting pulled out of this tank through the ME system. And likewise, the sulfuric acid should be going up slowly as it gets pulled out of this tank. And now since this is set to a lower priority than this, it will use sulfuric acid out of this tank first. And I like to partition these just so that if something goes wrong later, another fluid doesn't get jammed in there on accident. Alright, so now that we have ethylene, what am I doing here with this ethylene? So now that I have ethylene, we also want to put a fluid storage bus on this because ethylene is used for two things, I believe. Right now we're using ethylene to make polyethylene, but it can also, like this with oxygen, but it can also be used to make vinyl chloride by reacting it with chlorine. And then vinyl chloride can be used to make polyvinyl chloride, or our good friend PVC. And that'll also have uses later. So let's get a fluid storage bus for ethylene. And connect that up. So for now, we are using the ethylene to make polyethylene. So we need a chemical reactor, a fluid export bus to move it. We'll need another capacity card. We need a bucket of oxygen to set the export. Personally, I like to have a bucket of every fluid just available for setting filters and exports and stuff, so I'm just going to fill one with hydrogen as well, even though we don't need the hydrogen one quite yet. I also did something wrong here. This smart cable is maxed out, so that needs to be a dense cable. And then if I want to put the terminal back on it, I need... Where can I put you? There we go. And now we're no longer maxing out a piece of smart cable somewhere. Perfect. Alright, so we have our chemical reactor. And it looks like we need a little bit more energy conduit too. So in here we want ethanol, or what was it? Ethylene, not ethanol. So I need another bucket. Right, we want ethylene and oxygen to run in this chemical reactor. And I feel like that needs a program circuit. Yep, a program circuit on 0. Let's just grab a few acceleration cards to speed up the export buses. I think just one will do. Let's put one here, one here. Those are only 2 for now, I think. All right, and this will turn ethylene into polyethylene. We need polyethylene, I believe, in sheet form for patterns. So to do that, we need a fluid solidifier. And I believe we need a mold for sheets or plates. We'll put a fluid storage bus on this later because we need liquid polyethylene for a lot of processing stuff elsewhere. So if we put a fluid storage bus here, then we can fluid export bus it to the assemblers that need it later. So we're going to have this push polyethylene into here, solidify it. Grab a drawer, set this here. And voila, we have a drawer filling with polyethylene sheets. So I hope this process was somewhat informative as to what it takes to make polyethylene. It's a lot of machines, but it's not quite as complicated as you might think. The real trick is to make it so that you can automate this whole process without having to give it inputs, or with giving it minimal number of manual inputs. And that way this stuff just builds up automatically. All right, so that was quite a handful. Let's see if we can work our way a little bit closer to Applied Energistics autocrafting now. See you in a sec. It's been a while since we've claimed our Omni coins. Let's see how many we get. $40 nickels and what, like 8-ish stacks of pennies? Pretty good. I went ahead and made our polyvinyl chloride sheets as well. It's basically the same process as making the polyethylene sheets, except instead of polymerizing the ethylene, we react it with chlorine to make, here we are, to react ethylene with chlorine to make vinyl chloride. And then we polymerize the vinyl chloride with oxygen to make polyvinyl chloride, which we turn into sheets. So I just want to show that really quickly. With our fluid polyethylene, we can now start making circuits more easily by using these SMD or surface mounted device components. First we have the transistor, so it's just fine annealed copper, gallium, and this liquid polyethylene. And you get quite a few per craft, 32 per craft. We also can make resistors, capacitors, and diodes. and these will unlock these refined circuits. So we've already made central processing units with our precision laser engraver, and now we can also make these plastic circuit boards using our polyvinyl chloride sheets. So I'll be back when we have everything together to make a batch of the good tier 1 circuits. So at last, putting it all together, we have our plastic circuit boards, all of our surface mounted device components, and we can start producing these tier 1 circuits, the refined circuits. And we get 4 per craft, and we're crafting 2 stacks, or we have 2 stacks of like the circuit boards. So we are in the process of crafting 8 stacks of tier 1 circuits. How awesome is that? Now, 8 stacks sounds like a lot, but you'll notice that here in Applied Energistics, each of these circuits, or each of these processors, uses a tier 1 circuit, right? So 8 stacks of tier 1 circuits will go much faster than you think. But hey, 8 stacks of these tier 1 circuits, much cheaper and easier to make than what the process we were doing before. So I think we can wrap up today's episode there. I'd say today was a pretty good episode, or a pretty productive episode at least. We made a basic applied energistics system, and we set up automation to make both polyvinyl chloride and polyethylene. So these are both things we will use a lot of in the future. I think tomorrow, let's see if we can get into full automation using applied energistics. And I guess one thing that I think this really shows is the power of applied energistics fluid handling. Now, you could say that, yes, everything I did here you could just do with fluid conduits, but it would be a mess. You would need filters everywhere, you'd have conduits running into conduits. It's just much easier and much cleaner to do it this way. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and see you next time.